Merry Christmas. Wherever you find yourself today and whatever situation you find yourself in, I wanted to invite you to think with me for just a little bit about how the foolishness of Christmas leads us to wonder. My name is Ben Dockery, and I want to invite you to think about that theme for just a minute. What does the foolishness of Christmas have to do with the day that we're in? Before I do that, though, I recognize that this Christmas day, like many, but is unusual. Some of you are spending your day, you're watching kids just exhilarated. They're opening presents. There's toys around. There's going to be a sugar crash later on at some point in your family, and that's your day. Some of you aren't experiencing that joy. You are in a more confusing situation. You're for the first time not with family, and you're FaceTiming or Zooming or watching people open presents in another room while you're wearing masks, and you're spread apart. Maybe some of you this Christmas, it's a first without a loved one, a mom or dad or a spouse. And you're experiencing grief and loss this Christmas, and you're alone in a different way. And I know those are difficult times. And so whichever place that you find yourself, I want to invite you to just look at the Christmas story with me briefly. Each of those emotions, I think, are found inside of the biblical story, whether it's Mary and Joseph alone, whether it's the confusion of, is this really God's plan? Could this really be it, this child? Or whether it's the exhilaration of wise men or shepherds who are following the voice of God and following the star to find out what it is God is up to. Those things are all embedded inside of the story. And inside of 1 Corinthians chapter 1, Paul writes a letter to the church, and he's talking about Jesus, and he's specifically talking about the cross. But listen to what he says. He says this: "For since in God's wisdom, the world did not know God through wisdom, God was pleased to save those who believe through the foolishness of the message that was preached. For Jews asked for signs, and Greeks tried to seek wisdom, but we preached Christ and Christ crucified, a stumbling block to the Jews, foolishness to the Gentiles." And then the final verse in verse 25 says this: "God's foolishness is wiser than human wisdom." There's a lot of great stories, lots of great plot twists, lots of turns in action, lots of changes. Nothing and no one could have anticipated the true Christmas story, that God himself would send his son into the world, that the eternal one would become wrapped up in time and in flesh. One of the great ways that this is caught is in a song called "Who Would Have Dreamed" by Bob Kauflin. And the lyrics open like this: "On a starlit hillside, shepherds watched their sheep. Slowly David's city drifted off to sleep. But to this little town of no great renown, the Lord had a promise to keep. Prophets had foretold it. A mighty king would come, long-awaited ruler, God's anointed one. But the sovereign of all looked helpless and small as God gave the world his own son." It is an upside-down story. It is not one that a philosopher or debater of this age could have come up with. It is not one that a sign could have pointed to, as the Jews were looking for, to validate or prove their own faith. It is not us reaching up to God. It is God actually coming down to us, and that's the Christmas story. It is mere foolishness to believe that that is how God would actually come and rescue the world. He would display his love by sending himself, wrapped in a child's body, wrapped in flesh, incarnate, this God of eternity. The chorus of this song goes like this. This is how we'll close. "And who would have dreamed or ever foreseen that we could hold God in our hands, the giver of life, born in the night, revealing God's glorious plan to save the world." It's a story that on its face is foolishness, but it is God's wisdom. It is the good news. It is what we proclaim. It's what we believe. It is what this Christmas brings hope, what brings joy, and I hope it meets you where you are today.
On a starlit hillside, shepherds watched their sheep. Slowly David's city drifted off to sleep. But this little town of no great renown, the Lord had a promise to keep. Prophets had foretold it, a mighty king would come. Long awaited Son. And who would have dreamed or ever foreseen that we could hold God in our hands? The giver of life is born in the night, revealing God's glorious plan to save the world, to save